week anyway.
I get that one too.
He doesn't look good either. This one's gonna be 60. Right.
How you doing, sir?
How are you?
How's it
Oh,
going? Your first week?
Good. Grandpa always used to say, have a lose a lot, have a lot.
Said she ran into you the other day.
Domino's. Yes. Growing up. It's great. It's a great smile.
It's Tony, all yours.
Good evening, everyone. The hour being 7:02 PM on Monday, March 14th, 2022. I'd like to call to order City of Laconia City Council meeting. Before we start, though, I would ask that Counselor Haynes lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Counselor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Joined this evening by a brand new city clerk, city tax collector, right? Katie Gargano, and I'd ask you to please call the roll.
Counselor Cheney,
Here.
Counselor Susie,
Here.
Counselor Littman,
Present?
Counselor Haynes,
Here.
Counselor Hamel,
Present.
Counselor Felch,
Here.
Mayor Hosmer.
Here. Thank you. Also joining us at council table this evening is City Manager Scott Myers. And IT this evening is Glenn Smith, our Finance Director. Moving on to item number 7A, which is our regular meeting minutes of February 28th, 2022. Those minutes were distributed to the city council on February 29th. With no corrections or changes submitted to the clerk, the minutes will be accepted as distributed. Moving on to item number 8. Presentation of fiscal year 2021 annual comprehensive financial report. Scott McIntyre. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. As the mayor indicated, my name is Scott McIntyre. I'm one of the partners, or what we're called principals at this point in time at Melanson. And I appreciate the opportunity to come in here this evening. And I do see a busy agenda, so I'll try to be as brief as possible, but, cover all the necessary points that involved your fiscal year 21 audit. Your annual comprehensive financial report, the name has changed this year. That's in accordance with the revised standards. We're going to walk through some key parts about that. We have a management letter. I'm going to touch base on a couple of the recommendations we have, and then I'll try to answer any questions that the mayor and council may have. Starting with the annual comprehensive financial report, if I could ask you to turn your attention to page 1, which is the independent auditor's report. And it goes on for 3 pages. It is not my intent to walk through all 3 pages of this, but this is the highlight of your report. It's really what you pay us for. You pay us for our opinion, and based on the procedures we performed and the audit standards that we followed that are outlined here on page 1, 2, and 3, in our opinion, your financial statements are totally in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles for governmental entities here in the United States of America. Not any different than it's been in the past, but it still is a highlight to your financial statements that the independent auditors are issuing a clean, or what is technically known as an unmodified opinion. We're giving the opinion in accordance with GAAP, or generally accepted accounting principles, without modifications. So just a real quick introduction on that. Following that, on pages 4 through 11 is your management's discussion and analysis. This is a great resource to go back to at a later point in time and to see why key account balances may have changed. And later on this evening, when we're talking about your general fund, unassigned fund balance, which is still, to this day, is still the most popular place people look at in your report, there's a great write-up in your management discussion and analysis that really connect the dots between where your unassigned fund balance was at the beginning of the year what your results of operation were for fiscal year 21 and the resulting unassigned fund balance. I'll point that out in MD&A at the conclusion of walking through some of the financial statements. That takes us over to page 16. And pardon me, I'm sorry. I meant to go back to page 12 and 13 very quickly, and I'll focus on page 13. Page 12 and 13, first and foremost, are what are thought of as a long-term perspective balance sheet. On page 12, you see all your long-term assets, your capital assets and things like that. Over on page 13, you see all of the city's long-term liabilities. Focusing on page 13 in that first column of numbers, about halfway down, the key accounts on this that really need to just be brought to people's attention in any conversation about a local government's finances right now. A lot of the conversation deals with a government's net pension liability. And again, almost halfway down the page in that first column of numbers, you see it has an account balance as of June 30, 2021 of $65.8 million. And just below that, you have your net OPEB. OPEB is an acronym for Other Post-Employment Benefits. That's the retiree health care. Has an account balance or a liability of $13.5 million. Now, just a quick point of reference on those two key accounts. The net pension liability, again, $65.8 million. That's about a $16 million increase over the prior year. And keep in mind that this is Laconia's proportional share of the New Hampshire retirement system's unfunded liability. So why did the liability go up so much? The system and their auditors made the decision to decrease the discount rate or the expected rate of return on the plan's assets from 7.25% down to 6.75%, about a half a percentage point decrease in the expected future earnings of the plan. It's fairly consistent with what we see going on in other places in New England and what we know is going on across the country to bring that discount rate down to about 6.75. But that's the driving factor as to why you see almost a $16 million increase in your net pension liability. Below that, again, just to quickly point out, is the net OPEB liability that stayed virtually unchanged from the prior year. And collectively, those are generally thought of as the two big unfunded liabilities in your long-term perspective financial statements. Now, if I could turn your attention all the way over to page 16, I'm going to pass on a couple of pages, obviously in between your statement of activities that show the changes in your long-term net position during the fiscal year. And as you might expect, when your liabilities go up as much as I indicated, then the overall net position of the city on the accrual basis of accounting is going to decrease as well. That takes us to page 16. 16 is your governmental funds, focuses on the first column of numbers, and even more specifically than all of those numbers, the first place that most readers turn to is the third number up from the bottom, your unassigned fund balance, with an account balance as of June 30 of 2021 of just over $4.2 million. As a point of reference, that's increased by about approximately $900,000 over the prior year. And it represents, if you look at that account balance of 4.2 million as a percentage of your general fund expenditures, it's about 6.7%. So it's a solid balance sheet, and it shows the liquidity of the city's general fund, and it's very consistent with the prior year. And most governments for fiscal year 21 saw a modest increase in their unassigned fund balance. Now, there are a couple more things I would want to point out on this page. Still down in that fund balance section, a few numbers above the 4.2 million, you see a non-spendable fund balance of about $148,000. What's notable about that is last year, that account balance was about $1.2 million. I think when we were speaking with you folks last year, we talked about an accrued deficit in your internal service fund. During fiscal year 21, you funded that. And last year, because that deficit was sitting out here in your internal service fund, still everything has to come back to your general fund. So accounting principles required you to set aside some dollars as non-spendable. So what's notable there is, again, that there is no significant balance like there was a year ago. That 148,000 is simply an offset to your inventory and prepaids really nothing to be concerned about. Two rows below that, in your a committed fund balance of almost 4.4 million, that is essentially your capital reserve funds, and your assigned fund balance of 879,000. Those are just some appropriation carry forwards that will be honored in fiscal year 21. Again, leaving your unassigned fund balance of about $4.2 million, an increase of about $900,000. Now, to understand why that account balance increased by approximately $900,000, if I could ask you to turn your attention over to page 61 of your annual comprehensive financial report. And this is your budget versus actual comparative schedule. And if you look in that final column of numbers, about 2/3 of the way down the page, you see an account balance of 1.9 million. That represents the favorable revenues and the favorable expenditure performance. So on a budgetary basis, the city performed better than expected by about $1.9 million. Now, of that positive results of operation, if you simply subtracted during fiscal year 21, you used the $950,000 of your fund balance to fund the deficit in the internal service fund. That 1.9 minus the 950, the math isn't perfect. It's not designed to be, because there's a lot of things going on here, but 1.9 million less the 950 in fund balance that was used to fund the deficit in the internal service fund gets you to about $900,000, which, getting back to your general fund balance sheet, page 16, that we indicated that $4.2 million, that number went up about $900,000 over the prior year. It's all driven by budgetary results of operations, softened by the $950,000 of fund balance that was used. Now, if anyone didn't take any notes, but might want to turn to page 9 in your management's discussion and analysis. At the very bottom of page 9, and it runs into the very top of page 10, the city did a nice job in indicating what I just tried to articulate here, is that the unassigned fund balance went up. Again, I'm using some round numbers here, by about $900,000. It's from the positive budgetary results of 1.9 million, as indicated on page 61, offset by the use of $950,000 in fund balance. So your management's discussion and analysis is doing just what it needs to do, which is telling the reader in words what happened during the year and why certain key account balances changed during the year. So, one more page, if I see that the mayor and council all have copies. Something that's new this year that I'd just like to point out a little bit is over on page 24. I'll focus on page 24, but it's 23 and 24. On 24, the second column of numbers is called the custodial fund. That's something that didn't exist prior to fiscal year 21. There was some changes in accounting standards that required you to change how you report the tax. In essence, the taxes that you collect on behalf of other entities, like the state of New Hampshire and like the county tax. Previously, those were the inflows and the outflows flowed through the general fund, but not necessarily through revenue and expenditure accounts. This accounting standards created agency funds. So you now see a fuller picture, at least in my opinion, a fuller picture of all the inflows and outflows of resources that occurred in the finance department. That's a quick walkthrough of the financial statements. Also, as we understand in your packages, is our management letter. I'd like to walk through a couple of quick things in here. I'm going to start on page 3, but probably the thing that's most notable is on page 1. And
Scott, I don't think they have, that came late, so I don't think we have a copy of that letter
Oh.
in their packets. Maybe you can just reference
Of
what it
course.
is you're doing, because they
Sure,
don't have one.
sure. My apologies. I am very confident that I can articulate and communicate to the mayor and city council tonight the results of our management letter. Apologize that I didn't bring hard copies. As I was saying, I'm going to start, you don't have, I was going to say start on page 3, but you folks don't have it. Page 3 starts with our comments. Page 1 and 2 is our introductory letter. What's probably most notable in our introductory letter is page 1 and 2. A year ago, we reported in our management letter what we in the audit world would call a material weakness, where we found some deficiencies in the books and records that needed corrective action, using from generic terms there other than material weakness, other than material weakness. For fiscal year 21, again, what's noticeable in the introductory letter here is these are comments and suggestions for improvements. None of the items we identified here rise to the level, in our independent opinion, of being material weaknesses or significant deficiencies. And those are two technical terms, but as you might imagine, if significant deficiency, it's probably not good. And if it's material weakness, it's really needs corrective action right away. What we're suggesting here is just some recommendations for improvement. So I hope that first and foremost puts it in perspective. Our first comment dealt with a follow-up to the prior year, where we suggested and really thought that the city needed to make the improvements to its cash reconciliations, trust funds, and its capital asset accounting. Very pleased to be able to report that we found significant improvements in those areas, particularly as it relates to cash reconciliations and trust funds. Dealing with this year, I'm dealing with capital assets in a separate comment. It just seemed to make sense to write about it in a separate comment. So by and large, we think through the period of time of June 30, 21, that the cash and trust fund issues that we identified during our prior audit were addressed during fiscal year 21 in the closing process of that occurred over the summertime of last year. With respect to capital assets, still needs to be a little bit of improvement here. So much improvement, but we think the city can even improve a little bit more here in fiscal year 22 over its FY 21 capital assets. Capital assets, just maybe use a more generic term, fixed assets or your property, plant, and equipment. You have many reporting units, what we as auditors call reporting units. You have your governmental activities, you have a couple of enterprise funds, and you have internal service funds. And what we found was that some assets that might have been acquired in the general fund were capitalized in your internal service fund. So it's a little bit of a disconnect there. And in the case of your governmental activities, assets, some of the beginning of the year records, I still owe Glenn some information on this, but some of the beginning balances didn't tie in with your prior year ending balances. We also identified that there have been a couple years where there haven't been any new assets added for a couple of key departments, the school department and the airport department. So it's just an indication that there may be something missing there. We don't know, but I think some additional work is needed. And in conversations that I've had with the finance director, I've indicated that I think I suggested that the city not wait until closing out 22 and doing the capitalization for the year. I think this is a standalone project that the city should undertake as far as beefing up and perfecting some of your capital asset records. And our last recommendation deals with some new accounting standards. I pointed out, I believe it was the last page we looked at, page 24, where you report the custodial funds, and primarily that's the money that you collect on behalf of and for the state of New Hampshire and the county. You provided us with all that information. We're now suggesting you take it to the next step here in fiscal year 22 and actually book those transactions into your general ledger, not just in the financial statements at year end. And the second part of our third comment deals with another new accounting standards, called GASB, or the Governmental Accounting Standards Board. Happens to be, they issue their statements by number. Statement 87 deals with leases. Giving us a talk on this subject matter tomorrow. This is a little bit of a sleeper statement. There's a lot of work that may need to go into this. And we've been suggesting to many of our clients that are probably similar in size to Laconia that would not be uncommon in our estimation for the city to need to devote about 40 hours of time into summarizing all of your leases or lease-like agreements. Historically, the definition of leases has been you had capital leases and operating leases, and you account for capital leases and you forget about operating. You can't do that anymore. You need to look at both types of leases. So a comprehensive spreadsheet, for lack of a better word, needs to be assembled outlining all of the leases with the city, the school, the airport, although most of the airport's leases are exempt from the standard for a variety of reasons. But an overall very comprehensive summary of the leases here in Laconia, both as the lessee and the lessor, needs to be put together so you can evaluate what needs to happen to your financial statements for the year ended June 30, 22. And we're also suggesting, don't wait until the audit begins, the year 22 audit begins to start this process, because it is probably going to be more time consuming than most governments anticipate. So that's a super fast walkthrough of our audit of your financial statements. Again, the key highlights are, on the long-term perspective, your net pension liability went up significantly because the state of New Hampshire dropped the discount rate. Your general fund, that key account, the unassigned fund balance is up almost $1 million, 900,000 essentially. And that's driven by budgetary results, softened by the use of the 950 to fund the deficit, which we talked about. And in our recommendations, to me, the highlight is for 21, there are no material weaknesses, just some recommendations for improvements. And by and large, we think there's some work you can do to upgrade the capital asset records, finish implementing Statement 84 by putting the custodial funds in your ledger, and prepare for GASB 87 over the next 3 months by putting together a very comprehensive schedule of all the leases here in Laconia. And again, just to emphasize, where you are the lessee and if you are the lessor, both of those will be needed for your June 30, 22 audit. And with that, again, a super fast walkthrough, but I'm trying to be respectful of the busy agenda. But I do think I have hit the high points and made the points that our auditing standards require us to make to a board like this.
Thanks, Scott. I really appreciate it. Just going back to some of your suggestions on this, in regards to GASB 87, did you indicate it might be about a 40-hour project?
We're estimating that.
Okay, all right. And the capital asset standalone portion of this, you think it's approximately, how long would it take to stand that up, do you think, in your opinion?
I would probably say 25 to 30 hours.
Okay.
That's my best guess as to the time commitment to bring them up to where, you would want them to be, you, the city of Laconia.
Okay. Anyone else here with any questions? All right. Is it possible for you to say, compared to last year, seems like we've made significant improvements? I don't know if you're used to grading this or not, but it sounds like we've done a pretty good job as far as the areas of opportunity.
I never like to read, but since I made a mistake and didn't bring hard copies, I'll paraphrase some of this. It's not going to be verbatim, but in my management letter with respect to a follow-up to our prior year, in the current year, the city made significant improvements in the area of cash and trust funds, and then it went on a little bit from there. And I think that phrase, if you will, sort of summarizes the 21 audit compared to the 20 audit.
Terrific. Okay. Thanks very much. Any questions? Yes, Councilor Hamel.
Just one question. The city's borrowing ability compared to over the last several years compared to its ability to borrow more or whatever, where does that stand as far as the goals of the city, or in your view, is the city doing good on that? Or
I can't speak to the goals of the city. I'll defer to management on that. In terms of one of the key indicators, if you're so inclined to go to page 42. What this page indicates, right in the middle of page 42, you have your amortization schedules of your debt. First two columns are your bonds that are issued through public offerings. The second two columns are your bonds that are directly placed. The key thing that rating agencies and financial institutions look at here is, and I would draw a line, if you will, under the row where it says 2027 through 2031. And I do that because, in our opinion, when we see financial institutions look at a government's financial statements or a rating agency, they don't look just at how much debt they have, but how rapidly is that being paid out? And more specifically, what percentage of it is getting paid out over the next 10 years? You want to make sure you're not stringing out your debts. And I apologize, I don't have the percentage right here in front of me. It actually probably would be a good disclosure to get into your MD&A. But as I can do a little bit of math in my head, it's a pretty, I would say that the percentage of your debt that's paid off in 10 years is certainly not something that would be a concern to a financial institution or credit rating agency.
So I want to thank Scott and his team. Certainly challenges going through a COVID year and people in and out and meeting remotely and stuff. And then certainly Glenn and his team for putting this together, a lot of work. But again, appreciate you being here tonight. Councilor Hamlet, you turn to page 67, the statistical section. That's not something that Melanson puts together, but it's something that Glenn has for the trend. So this might answer your question.
Page
starting on-
again, I'm sorry.
The statistical section starts on page 67, and there's a whole lot of different information there, but the area that talks about what our indebtedness is, really, I think we want to focus on page 78. And then going further onto page 81 and into 82. So this will tell you, again, what our general obligation bonds are, by year, principal and interest. You can see the chart there of the net bonded debt per capita going back to 2012, a little increase in 2015, but really been on a pretty steady plane there. I think another good indicator, if you look at page 82, you can see that as a percent of the total general fund expenditure, where our principal and interest payments have been going back to 2012, again, as a percentage of the overall general fund, we have been in a range of the high 6% to the high 7% consistently all the way through there. So, and there's another page here that I don't know if I'll put my fingers on it real quickly, but of the overall legal,
80.
page 80, thank you. Of the overall legal debt limit that the city could have, we have used 32.4%. If you look at the number in the lower left column, 32.4%. We've issued of the overall legal city debt limit in the schools at 8.2%. So again, just another indication that we are, as Scott pointed out, we're paying debt down rapidly. We're now using the credit card in management's opinion aggressively and passing this, kicking the can down the road and spending on bonds with principal and interest payments. But this document's online for anybody who's listening to us tonight or wants to see it, so it's available there as well. But if you haven't focused on that statistical section, again, that's something that the city produces, but there's some good trends there that kind of give you a 10-year window as well.
Also, historically, I think over that time period, we've kept our debt down, or what our borrowing capability down quite substantially.
Yeah, and I think those legal limit numbers of 32% and 8%, allude to that.
Good report. Thank you. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Scott, very much. I appreciate your work on this. Thank you, Glenn. Okay.
This is a good estimate. Glenn.
Terrific. So let's move on to item number 10, which is citizen comments for matters not on the agenda. If there's a matter you'd like to address the city council that is not on tonight's agenda, now would be the appropriate time, both in the chamber and online. If you're in the chamber, step right up, introduce yourself. Anyone online, just raise your hand and Mr. Smith will acknowledge you. Thank you. Fair enough. We'll move on to item number 14A, which is a public hearing on ordinance 2022-189 to amend the city code, chapter 189 sewers. Notice of this hearing was made available on the March 2nd, 2022 edition of the Laconia Daily Sun and posted at Laconia City Hall, the Parks and Recreation Community Center, Laconia Public Library and the offices of SAU on March 1st, 2022. The city council meeting of February 28th, 2022, Counselor Littman recommended conducting a second public hearing at the March 28th meeting. Is that recommended conducting a second public hearing at the, okay, so we're gonna meet, we're gonna do it on the 14th and the 28th.
Right, so down in your motions, you'll open this public hearing, receive comment, and then just recess it so that we
Yes.
continue the same public hearing in 2 weeks for
That's right.
another opportunity.
So at this point in time, I'd like to open the public hearing at 7:32 PM and wish anyone who'd like to speak to this matter, now would be the appropriate time, both online and in the chamber. Anybody? Thank you, Mr. Smith. Go right ahead, Counselor Littman.
I just, before you close the hearing, I know that we received at least one letter on this matter. I want to make sure that gets into the record here.
Absolutely, yep.
I thought the lady said she was gonna be here.
Okay, well, we'll close the public hearing at 7:33.
Recess?
Nope, we're going to recess the public hearing at 7:33 PM. We will address, we'll have another public hearing. Come on, we'll continue it to March. Yeah, we will recess and continue this hearing on March 28th. I'll move right along right now to item number 16, which is council comments. Counselor comments. If there are any counselors now seeking to make comments on anything on your mind, now would be the appropriate time. Where are you going, Counselor Cheney? Your demonstrative aids tonight? Slides, anything? How about committee reports?
I just have one council comment.
Go right ahead, go right ahead.
I just, in terms of the manager, any update on the use of the parking behind the church?
We've not made that outreach yet. I will. I was just trying to wait through the plowing season and that type of stuff, but we'll certainly be on my radar to get that done before the next meeting.
Committee reports.
The Finance Committee continued its review of the welfare guidelines. We have another scheduled session for 6:15, the night of the next council meeting, the 28th.
Any other council, committee reports? How about liaison reports? I'm looking at you, Counselor Susie. Nothing, okay. Let's move along to item number 19, which is, this will be an opportunity for citizens to comment on current agenda items. If there's a current agenda item that you would like to address, now would be the appropriate time. That's both for folks in the chamber as well as online. Okay, move right along to item number 20, which is the city manager's report. You have anything tonight, Scott, or?
I do, but
Everybody's been
I will
quiet.
be brief. Everybody's been quiet. I don't want to ruin the mood that we got going on here. So your financial and operational trends report is included in your agenda for the first meeting of the month. Starting at the top of that report, you can see the current year construction value, again, tied to the assessing year. So April 1 through March 31st is the assessing year under state law. So we have one more month to report out, the month of March, which we've started, but we will tally up the building permit reports at the end of this month and finalize the year, if you will. But we've got 47.3 million in net new building permit value that was pulled in the first 11 months. A year ago at this time, that value was 34 million. 2 years ago at this time, that value was 15 million. So certainly quite a bit of activity going on. March, can get a few $1,000,000 in value depending on how the weather looks and where people are at with being able to get into the ground and start doing some of that stuff. So cautiously optimistic that we might be able to inch over that $50 million mark. But if I could make those predictions, I would be doing better on my DraftKings account right now than I am. So just sharing. Toward the bottom of the page, the public assistance data. I had mentioned we had a few increases coming through the fall and the winter months as some of the support programs through COVID and various other programs had started to run out and run their course. I will bring to your attention, though, I had mentioned at that time as well that we were anticipating reimbursement from some of our COVID CDBG grants that we were awarded, and some of our various social service agencies in Laconia were awarded. So you can see the reimbursement line is now risen to 17,000. So even though we've had the expense, we've been able to recoup a certain amount of that through some of the CDBG accounts that are there. Turning to the second page of the report, property tax collection at 98.5%. Again, the strongest level for the years going back to 2014 that you see here. Sound like a broken record, but at the bottom, motor vehicle registrations, again, we are 2/3 of the way through the year. We're at 68.8% of our target projection or budgeted projection for revenue, and we're about $130,000 cash ahead of the same pace last year at this time. So even though we've increased our revenue estimate, we're still ahead of pace and up 130,000. You can see the various overtime accounts that are broken down. And again, this is going to ebb and flow, COVID, quarantines, family sickness, and when folks have sickness of a child or a spouse or a member of their household. Also, with some of the restrictions being left, more people are starting to take and use vacation time and take those trips again that they've delayed for a year or two. So again, some of this is reimbursable elsewhere that we've got that I've reported out to you, but that's the overview and a snapshot there. Page 4 of the report, again, you can see the impact fee revenues every time a new certificate of occupancy is issued. Depending on what it's for, it pays an appropriate amount of impact fees. You can see the current balances in the various accounts that are there. Page 5, all of our reserve.
Impact fees. What is our timing on any of the, I see the school made a transfer up this year. What is our timing on some of the larger ones like fire and roads?
I believe school was the most dated or most aged count that we had, and that's why they made the transfer this year. Impact fees are collected on new development to help support any growth and infrastructure capital needs that they cause in the community. I believe I'm accurate in saying that once you collect the fees, you've got 7 years in order of which to utilize those funds. And if they're not used in that time frame, they would have to revert back to the developer of a particular project. So the school transfer out there gets us well seasoned, well under that 7-year radar. I want to say all of the other ones, we have probably transferred money out of impact fees. I'm going to guess off the top of my head, probably within the last 3 years for all of them. So I don't think we've got anything that's date sensitive for us right now, but certainly they're available to spend at any time. You don't have to wait until they hit a certain dollar amount or a certain length of time being there. Page 5 shows the various reserve balances and a non-capital reserve, the accrued leave, winter maintenance, health insurance stabilization, and motorcycle week accounts. You also see the different TIF balances for downtown Lakeport and the Weirs. And I believe that Weirs number, even though negative now, probably has some kind of another partial year debt service payment to go on, and that'll probably come up a little closer to the $100,000 range. But again, that's performing exactly as we had thought it would, and it's decreasing in the amount of deficit that it's in, and is paying more back to the general fund. So that is certainly on track, even though it's carrying a deficit, showing a deficit right now. And then the interesting time of year when we collect both boat taxes and we have winter maintenance going on. So that's a sign that maybe winter is almost over and spring is coming. So you can see the boat revenue starting to flow in. We did increase the revenue projection in that line item by 10%, also $10,000 this year, just based on the past couple of years of trend and history. The EMS billing history for current year at the bottom of the page, comparison for last year and the year before on the top of the next page. And you continue to see that while we have not had a ton of significant snow accumulation, it's been the winter of freezing, melting, sleeting, refreezing, and a lot of small trips out that are kind of adding up and a lot of them seem to happen on the weekends. So you can never get that snowstorm that starts at 7 in the morning and is done by noon, so the crews are done by 3 on a weekday type of thing, but we keep trying. So we have run a little heavier into our targeted amount for in-house overtime. You can see that running at a deficit. We're significantly under in our outside contractor line, and the winter maintenance being supplies and replacement parts and salt and sand and stuff is still to the good. So where we are roughly halfway through March right now, I'm hopeful that the funds that remain here will carry us through. Again, no predictions, no guarantees. On one other final note before I take questions, I want to bring to the council's attention the retirement of longtime city personnel specialist Paula Baumel. Paula is retiring at the end of this month with more than 25 years of service to the city. A true professional, just a terrific person, a team player, someone who's meticulous and detailed in her work, really connects with just about every employee in the city through paperwork and enrolling in benefits. And certainly she will be missed, here in the city. So we want to wish Paula well in her future endeavors. I'm happy to take any questions anyone may have.
Thank you, Scott. Any questions of manager? Seeing none. Okay, so moving on to item 21, which is new business. This is a first reading of resolution 2022-03 relative to authorizing an application for $2,500,000 loan from the New Hampshire Clean Water State Revolving Loan Fund for the Northern Lakeport Area Sewer Project and appropriating funds for the same. The Northern Lakeport Area Sewer Project includes North Street, Sheridan Street, Belvedere Street, and School Street. Sewer collection pipes on these streets are undersized and made of clay, which make them susceptible to clogging. The pipes are experiencing significant groundwater infiltration, and the sewer collection pipes in these streets are at risk of failure due to age. New Hampshire DES has committed funding through the state's Clean Water State Revolving Loan Fund. Additionally, New Hampshire DES has committed $747,600 grant from the American Rescue Plan Act, which, once approved, will reduce the amount of the loan. The project is currently in the preliminary design phase and scheduled for construction in 2022 after the completion of the Elm Street Sewer Project. Fiscal impact approval will authorize borrowing $2.5 million from the Clean Water State Revolving Fund at interest rates ranging from 2.0% to 2.37%, depending on the term as determined by the City Council Finance Committee. The city manager recommends approving this resolution, authorizing the city manager to file an application with the New Hampshire CWSRF program and for a $2.5 million loan to fund the Northern Lakeport area. This report was submitted by Krista Larson. So, Scott, before I jump into any motions here, 2.5 million is the total dollar loan amount, and DES will grant us $747,600. So our net amount will go down to about 1.7. Is that correct?
Yes. Sometimes with these programs, there's loan forgiveness as a component of them, and we've had one on one of our more recent projects as well. In this particular case, it's the grant dollars that they're able to apply towards it. So yes, 2.5 is the grossed up number. It'll net out to the 1.7 area that you spoke of. Okay.
And certainly I'm sure you've thought of this and you are planning on it, but we talk about the completion of the Elm Street project. Maybe just touch on that to me. Obviously nobody wants to peel up the road twice. And obviously now, since you've got it peeled up on this project, maybe it's the time to do it. So what's the plan? What's the schedule look like?
So Elm Street, we're going to be getting back into the road to continue where we left off somewhere, I think just, my bearings east of Levitt Park, I think would probably be. So as weather conditions allow this spring, we'll be continuing work down Elm Street. We'll be cognizant not to get too close to in front of Elm Street School while school is at session. We should hit the timing right so that when Elm Street School or school year is done, we'll be down there in front, and then we will be completing finished at least base course paving on Elm Street and a couple of lengths that we're doing on Massachusetts Avenue and Jefferson. It's not the entire length, but it's portions, some of which we've already done some overlays on to patch them through the last winter or two. So that will be completely done. When we put down the final wearing course of paving will depend on schedule and see the timing, whether that happens this year or we might let it sit for the winter and do it first thing in the spring of next year. But under either scenario, Elm Street will be quote unquote finished and have a brand new paved surface. We will not start on this northern section of Lakeport until that is done. And basically, if you come in off of Sheridan and you hit the streets that the mayor mentioned, North Street, Sheridan, Belvedere, and School, it's not going the entire lengths of those, but it almost comes into that point where they kind of come down and meet at a freeway, and it's going to fan out. And I don't know the exact distance we're going up, but we're probably going up maybe a third to a ballpark way up each of those streets to collect that whole system. The other work that we're doing right now is on Franklin Street and on Bell Street, or Franklin up to Bell. Fairmont. And actually, and that work's being completed this spring and summer season as well. So that whole area will be done before we start undertaking. And then, these are less traveled roads, so there should be less of an impact as Elm Street will be wide open for all of the through, corridor traffic.
So just going forward, I think all of us who've been here long enough know that we start doing road work. Necessary work has to be done. Seems to rankle residents more than just about anything in the city. So any outreach to folks in the neighboring areas that are going to be impacted by this? Anything planned?
We'll be doing, once we firm up the Elm Street completion project, we'll start doing posting in the newspaper, get it in Laconia links, get information up on the website, kind of give the project timeline like we've done with a couple of the larger projects. I guess the nice thing, if you want to refer to it around these streets, is there were a lot of cut through and cross streets. And for the folks who live there, other than visitors and maybe, the delivery trucks that might go there for various reasons, I think, and Councilor Felch, you live out there, I think most folks are going to know, okay, I'm going to head north to get over to Elm Street here versus, head south to get on through but there's a lot more access points than, let's just say, on Court Street.
There is. And I can tell you mostly everybody on Jefferson and Mass Ave already know.
So if I don't want to belabor this, but if a resident has a problem with what's going on and wants to let somebody know, what's their point of contact?
Call my office.
So is there at some point here, were we able to provide a point of contact and a phone number? Part of me says, why don't we do a flyer
Go
drop?
to me, that's fine.
Let me reach out to Councilor Felch.
As we
but
get
something like
closer and
that.
maybe around the June timeframe, once we start to get a firmer date when we're going to be in there starting this, we can get out the map, show them the timeframe of where we expect to be as the project progresses, contact information, and I'll be glad to share phone numbers with Councilor Felch as well.
Okay, all right. Thanks very much. Any questions of the city manager before we go further on the motions here?
I've got one. I don't want to sway off this too much, but there is a question
Yeah, go right ahead.
right. Court Street, could we have, no, I'm good. But what I'm interested in seeing is, can we have an update of what Court Street costs the city totally? Because we voted for, I believe, 2 bonds of 2.5 million apiece to do some of the major projects, and I think that was one of them. So kind of like to see what it costs us to do that street. both
Absolutely.
underground and above.
Yeah, we can give you the full breakdown of what was water, sewer. We obviously don't have the private, we can tell you what the private utilities did. We don't have necessarily their cost of what gas or anything did to
Yeah,
that
I'm
and stuff.
I'm more interested in what the city did.
Absolutely. Yeah, we can put together a timeline of what those projects were. I just want to remind that was an expensive project for not only because it was comprehensive and everything from, water, sewer, drainage. You think about that and you try to parallel that to another road. There's 3 turning lanes of traffic the entire length of Court Street versus a traditional 2, and you've got sidewalks on both sides versus a lot of our streets only have sidewalks on one side. So when you look at a project, that's a very expensive project just because of the extra volume of material that you were using. But we can put that together for you.
Okay. Now, is there also plans, are we going from the Durkee Brook Bridge north to the line, or is that done?
not in any time soon. We put down a maintenance shim there probably about 4 years ago. That's held up very well. It's very similar to the one that we bought some time with on the stretch of Union Ave from Main Street up to Busy Corner. That was bad. That bought us some time. So Wes and I are very secure then, and we're not going back into Court Street during our tenure with the city.
All right, let's
Right,
move
Wes?
along to the motions. First motion is a motion to move to waive a reading of this resolution in its entirety to read by title only. Counselor Cheney, seconded by Counselor Haynes. Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please indicate by raising your hands. 6 votes in the affirmative, that motion passes. Second, looking for a motion to move a first reading of resolution 2022-03, a resolution authorizing application for a $2,500,000 loan from the New Hampshire Clean Water State Revolving Loan Fund for the Northern Lakeport Area Sewer Project and appropriating funds for the same. So made by Counselor Felch, seconded by Counselor Hamel. Any further discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please indicate by raising your hands. That's 6 votes in the affirmative, and that motion passes. Katie, if I'm buzzing along too fast, I'm just,
You're good.
give me a hand wave, okay? I get excited when I kind of start to see the end line. Finally, looking for a motion to schedule a public hearing on March 28th, 2022 during the regular city council meeting to gather input prior to adoption. So made by Counselor Felch, seconded by Counselor Hamel. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, please indicate by raising your hands. 6 votes in the affirmative, and that motion passes. Moving on to item number 21B, which is the future of the Wood Bridge over the railroad tracks on Centenary Avenue. Scott, you want to just maybe walk us through or Wes is here. I mean, I think we've covered this.
We did. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the, based on input and Counselor Cheney leading the charge at the state DOT 10-year transportation public hearing here, and based on input from residents who live in the Weirs area, the Centenary Methodist Campground area, there was real concern about the wooden bridge crossing over the tracks there being demolished in the next couple of years, because in the summer months where the other access point coming down by Lobster and the Rough at the edge of the boardwalk is closed to vehicular traffic, that means everything would have to go out up by the Aqua area at that end of Centenary. It's really a real pinch point and a real challenge. So the state has revised their thinking on that. They are going to rehab the bridge, I believe that by fiscal year 25, I think it says in here, and turn over a rehab bridge to the city is the proposal, in which the city will then be responsible for the maintenance of it going forward. So the state's going to rehab, rebuild, maybe not the whole thing, but work with engineers and design and get it up to snuff. And then it's going to be turned over to the city for the ongoing repairs. So you'll see the DOT letter in your background information there. You see comments from Wes that even though it's going to be rehabbed, there will be ongoing maintenance. There'll be some just general board replacement. There'll be some more extensive board replacement over the years where we close it in the winter and we're not plowing over it. That'll extend the life on it a little bit longer than if it was taking some wear and tear during the winter months. Just a caution, we don't think it's a big deal, but it does go over the rail right of way. So anytime you're doing inspections and you're down there in that rail area, it is an active rail line, even though the train runs very infrequently. Sometimes you have to work with state DOT and railroad laws and hire an appropriate flagger for safety reasons. I want to say that when the WOW Trail was going out and doing some planning and some engineering and design work out through Lakeport and heading up towards the Weirs, they ran into the same thing where they had to hire railroad flaggers for safety reasons. So just be cognizant that even though the bridge will be turned over to us, there will be some ongoing maintenance that at some point either we'll have to go into the operating budget or potentially have a discussion about does the Weirs TIF assist in paying for some of those expenses, but that's not for tonight.
Counselor Littman.
I know it's not for tonight, but I would request that as you're submitting the next budget to create a reserve fund or explicitly in the next budget that we could start to put some dollars into it.
Okay.
You mean just to put a space, a line item?
To a line item in some nominal dollar figure, so we don't lose track of it. Well, I thought I saw $2,500 for the wood. That'd be a good first year
Well, we're hoping when it's turned over to us in 2025 or 26, that we've got a couple of years where it won't require anything. But anyway, point taken that, yes. And on a similar vein, I think we've got, I don't know, my budget book would be, I think we have 1 year left to pay off. Did we pay off the LED?
That's correct.
They're all paid off? Or what is this last year?
$60,000.
So the same type of thing. We now own the bulbs there that have a 10-year life to them, but now we're 5 years into the life of those bulbs. And at some point, now that the debt is going to be paid off on that and we're saving, 60-something thousand dollars a year, we ought to be thinking about taking a piece of that and putting it into a streetlight replacement account, because, I don't know if they're going to last 10 years or 15 years, but they could
Yes.
all go very quickly within a short period of time with each other. So that would be prudent money now that it's paid off to start taking a small amount and feeding an account like that as well. So this is the last year. So that would be something that we would be looking to do in one budget from now.
Okay,
Is there a motion on this?
I don't see a motion, so I'm going to look to Scott and ask you, what would you like?
I think you just acknowledged the receipt of the DOT letter and the outline for rehabbing the bridge, and that the city will commit to taking ownership upon a successful rehabilitation of the bridge.
And we're not going to plow it in the winter.
That would not be our intention. I mean, it's shut right now in the winter time.
That takes it from 10 years to 20 years.
Right. No, I mean, it's not used in the winter time right now. I don't know why we would change that practice.
Who would like to make that motion? Oh, go right ahead, Jeff.
And it's probably more to, well, you and Wes, if we're not gonna plow it, we're gonna make sure it's put some barriers up there, 'cause somebody's gonna try and go over.
I think there's barriers near.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's chained, it's
Chain,
chained
yeah.
up, yeah.
Thank you.
So consistent. Would you like a question or you?
No, I just, again, having watched things happen over the years, is that we document this in some more specific way. That's the intent. We're accepting it with the intent of not having it used as a winter bridge. I just, again, change in administrations, change in counselors, these are the types of things that fall through the cracks, and someone, you'll have to clean up those things later on.
I agree.
I mean, let me say, could it be used in the winter? Yes, it could. So I mean, 2 councils from now, the council could get comments from residents down there saying, why isn't the bridge open in the winter? And something could change on that.
Yeah,
I mean, it would-
I don't think we should look to bind them, but we should just make it the intent of the motion here that.
Status quo.
I
Yes,
guess, though, we're committing funds for a long-term capital project. I think if the intent ought to be clear. I'm not saying a subsequent counselor can't change that if they so chose, but I think that we should not lose the intent. I mean, we've seen over the years here that things that aren't documented well come back to bite us. And I'm just asking us to do more than just putting it in the minutes that in 5 or 10 years from now, someone won't.
so how about this, Council Lippman? Let's put it in the motion. All right, and that should preserve the intent of the council going forward.
I'd be happy with
So if another council wants to ignore it and do what they want to do, I guess that's their business, but we can certainly let the motion reflect that it is our intent that the bridge will be closed during the winter months
Because of life expectancy of the bridge.
because of life expectancy.
To extend the life expectancy.
Oh, for Pete's sake. How about,
This is why we didn't prepare the motion for you.
How about preparing a motion to bring it back next council meeting?
how about that? Let's table this and let's do a written motion, bring it back next time around, okay?
We'll craft something
Motion-
for you. that
Motion to table.
reflects the
So I'll make that
desires.
Counselor. Counselor Haynes made the motion, although seconded by Counselor Susie. All those in favor? 6 votes in the affirmative. This is on the table and we can do a written motion. On item number 21C, which is 2021 recommittal sewer warrant per chapter 189-50, big C. Collection of flat rate sewer accounts are collected by the tax collector. This is a recommittal to the new city clerk tax collector, Katie Gargano. It is Lindsay Allen, our tax collector, recommended this. So right now we'd be looking to move for a motion to move to approve the 2021 recommittal sewer warrant as presented, which is now attached to your staff report. So made by Counselor Felch, seconded by Counselor Haynes. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please indicate by raising your hands. 6 votes in the affirmative, and that motion passes. Item number 21D, which is to authorize reallocation of funds previously approved to provide for capital improvements. Scott, could you give us a 10,000 foot on this?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So in working on the budget that we'll be presenting to you for the next fiscal year in April and trying to pull all the pieces together, everything from carry forwards we had last year from some particular projects that maybe have come in under budget or we determined we weren't doing them and we need to repurpose some funds. And looking at some of the American Rescue Program Act funds, the ARPA funds that we received in August, and also anticipating another round of 800 and some odd $1,000 coming this August. Kind of a big jigsaw puzzle of what's there and what I'm trying to work into next year's budget. And as always, there's, especially for those of you who sit on the CIP committee, you know how many requests come in and how many we've got the ability to fund. So we try to find other ways to repurpose dollars, use some of our non-capital reserve accounts, use some underspent line items. So these are a few projects, by no means all of the projects that I'll be bringing you forward to fund outside of next year's budget. But these are ones that, as we did last year at this time, staff and I felt it would be important to try to get a jump start on them by moving some dollars that exist already so that we can advance a few of these things. And examples are a few items left over from the Weir's bathhouse renovation that we can purchase and use for this season: lifeguard chairs, an improved gazebo, and the Weir's Beach water access for the ADA pads that are the hard pads that get folks who are mobility challenged to get down and actually get into the water. So we think if those items get funded now, you know, hopefully without any supply chain issues, we can get things rolling and get them there. The O-Pee-Chee Park pathway was $9,800 that was allocated a few years ago through the Parks Commission. Upon further review, and we were dealing with design and engineer, the area they wanted to put the path was kind of a low area, and we thought water was going to settle and be a lot of puddling there, and that folks, depending whether they're going to softball or baseball or whatever, kind of make their own pathways anyway. So this would be repurposing for a new roof, again at O-Pee-Chee though, but for the building at the track. And then also we've got some carry forward money from contingency, not in the current year budget, but from last year's budget that we carried forward. We'd like to do that so that we can repair the river walk outside the building on this corner heading down towards the post office, because the roots are heaving in and you've got significant pedestrian trips there. So the intent would be to tear that up, cut the roots out, put the appropriate barriers down so the roots don't come back, and then get that paving. And again, wouldn't that be great to get the work done this spring so you get a whole season's use out of it versus doing it this fall and we run into winter. And the final project here would be $20,000 again for ADA access at Bond Beach. So we did all the landscaping and the grading, and the beach looks great, but now we just need that final piece for ADA compliance to get those hard pads so folks can access the water itself over the beach. So collectively, these projects here, as you see in the resolution, are all coming out of existing dollars, but they would help us jumpstart these for the spring.
Thank you. Any questions of the city manager on the document before us? Yes.
Thank you, Scott. I'd like to bring a couple others forward, and I think this is probably be a good time to do it. The Bond Beach Bathhouse and Sewer Line. There's funds there through the 2022 ARPA fund of $314,000, and that project is kind of listed for $210,000. I'd like to see that since the cash money is actually there, to have that go forward along with these, so that engineering and architectural work or whatever needs to be done for the sewer and the bathhouse itself can get started this spring.
I didn't bring the sheet that I shared with you and Councilor Cheney as being on the CIP committee. And again, I'm not saying no, we can't, but I want to look at it because, as I said before, there's 5 or 6 different pods of money. Some of it's going to show up in the capital and the budget that you are yet to approve. Some of it's in ARPA funds that we got in August, so it's cash in hand. But another piece of that is ARPA funds that we're not getting till August.
Yeah, this one is the 2020.
Okay, so that there's a lot of moving parts. So I would be willing. Amy, we haven't even designed what that We do have the design.
I mean, if we can't do it tonight, then
Maybe let's look at it
For
for
the
the next meeting. I'm thinking the fact that we even haven't even gone out to bid on it yet and got somebody lined up, the likelihood of it getting done and completed by the time we start in, the beach season, when school gets out in June, is probably slim to none.
exactly.
And I don't think we want them there in July and August doing this work anyway. So realistically, even if you approved it tonight, we're probably not doing any construction until maybe late this fall or first thing next spring in advance for the following season. So we'll look at it if it makes sense to bring it forward, but I think then we have to shift that out of the 22 funds and offset it with something else that we're planning on doing. I just got to make sure the numbers line up.
Okay. It just said I'd like to, I mean, that project's been on the books forever. And I'd like to see it at least get started. I mean, if there's further engineering or whatever that needs to be done, we can do that through the summer and maybe early fall. Start
Absolutely. So let me just
September.
see where the numbers line up and what year and how they all come together.
And also, I'd like to see us give the security fence at the police station. Although those ARPA monies are not due till, I believe, August of this coming year, which will be the 23 year. Not so much approval to go ahead and do it, but for them to start, if you want to call it engineering, or take a look at what's needed there, so that they can have a firmed up number for when we vote on this.
Can I offer a suggestion?
You may, and I'll listen.
When I present the budget in March, that's when I was planning on bringing that comprehensive sister document to you. So the intention would be to present the budget on, I'm sorry, April, not March, April 11th is the target date to present the budget. And I'd love to present what I shared with you and Counselor Cheney as CIP committee members at that point. So collectively, you get the big picture of how these 25 or 30 projects from various funding sources are all interwoven. And I think there's no reason, after looking at that and everybody getting that background, we can't do a motion maybe at the last meeting in April and jumpstart it almost just
Okay.
as quickly.
That's fine. Thank
Okay,
you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'd be looking for a motion right now. A move to approve Resolution 2022-04 as presented to authorize reallocation of funds previously approved to provide for capital improvements. So made by Counselor Cheney, seconded by Counselor Susie. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please indicate by raising your hands. That's 6 votes in the affirmative, and that motion passes. Scott, in taking a look at this under 22A under unfinished business, which is the second reading of ordinance 2022-189 to amend the city code, chapter 189 sewers. If we are having a second public hearing on March 28th, we're continuing this as well, right?
Yeah, we just put it on because you tabled it to this meeting, but I would just suggest if there's no objection from counselors,
Go ahead and be
you just leave it on the
continued.
table and you can take it off again if you choose after the
Would you like a
continuation.
formal tabling of it or no?
No, it's tabled now, so if there's no objection, I would just.
Okay,
move on.
that would be part of it. Okay, fair enough. And item number 22B, which is on the table, which is RFQ for urban planning services downtown Laconia. The only I'd like to have someone take it off the table. And as you can see, there's been something added to it, which Scott and his team did 2 weeks ago. The only, if it were to come off the table, the only thing that I might suggest is in line 1, which is to, the city of Laconia is requesting a statement of qualifications from qualified and experienced firms to conduct a comprehensive downtown urban/parking study. I'd like urban to be put in that. I know it's not a significant move here and it's still only RFQ at this point, but I would like to see that just to make sure it's opened up to those that maybe have some specialty in urban planning.
I'm happy to, if there's consensus, I'm happy to take that just as an administrative addition to it. No need to pull it off the table, just change one. I mean, unless you want to, if you want to move this forward, then you do need to pull it off the table and just move it with that one amendment.
So I would
but
look
guess
to
you
pull
could.
it off the table tonight and move it forward, yeah. So hopefully someone might make that motion. So made by Counselor Haynes, seconded by Counselor Susie. All those in favor of taking it off the table, please indicate by raising your hands. That's 6 votes in the affirmative. It's off the table. We're looking for suggesting a friendly amendment. And on line 1 of page 1, it's suggested to conduct a comprehensive downtown urban / parking study. Someone be willing to make that friendly motion for amendment? Thank you.
Capital U or?
It's, we'll go you. We'll go you. Made by Counselor Cheney, seconded by Counselor Susie. Thank you. Any further discussion on that amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment, please indicate by raising your hand. That motion, that amendment passes. So now we'd be looking to, for a motion to approve this as amended. So made by Counselor Susie, seconded by Counselor Cheney. Any further discussion on this motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, please indicate by raising your hand. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 votes in the affirmative, and that motion passes. Thank you for your patience on that. Thank you, Scott. I'll be looking to adjourn the meeting at 8:11 PM. Thank you, counselors. Thank you, Stacy. Katie, welcome.